So this is, I guess, the pilot episode of the WetzCast. That's not the permanent title. I'm Noah. I'm going to start doing this podcast to keep me from going insane during the coronavirus break that we're in right now, which is kind of what this podcast is about. I've got my friends Dustin, Austin, and Sebastian here to talk about it. Dustin's a smart guy. Austin's a smart guy. Sebastian's a smart guy. That's why they're here. So we're just going to go. We have some questions. I think Sebastian asked a lot of them, so this ought to be interesting. The first question is, I guess they're mostly about coronavirus. How long do we see the virus going for? What do y'all think?
There hasn't really been a number on that yet. Like I read an article in The Atlantic yesterday that basically it laid out 4 different timelines. And timeline number 1 was this thing just magically goes away with spring. And like the flu. Like you don't hear people getting the flu in spring. And it basically said the general consensus is that, yeah, no, that's not going to happen. Because in Australia right now, it's summer/fall. And we know Australia is pretty hot normally, and the virus is spreading just fine there. So we don't think that's going to have any effect. So it really depends on, once we get to the herd immunity level of like 70% of people getting it, that's what the whole flattening the curve thing is. Basically, we've said that we're all going to get it at some point. So we might as well make it so that less people get it at a time so that our hospital system isn't overwhelmed.
Yeah, well, and I think it's important to specify how long do you see it going on for? What do you consider the end? Like you said, there's the herd. I can't remember the word that you just used.
Herd immunity.
Herd immunity, yes. So you could say that's the end, or you could say the end is when we develop a vaccine. Vaccine, we know, is not going to be for at least a year.
Well, right. So
18 months right now is the best prediction. But the herd immunity, I've seen things as early as 6 months. Not just the spring thing, but I've seen a lot of people saying 6 months. Don't know where that number's coming from.
How well social distancing works.
Yeah.
Because think about it. If it doesn't work, then we are all going to get it quicker. That's how that works. The social distancing makes us slower than not makes it go faster, right?
Yeah.
The only problem with that is that the hospital system in America, and really hospital systems all around the world, can't deal with that.
Well, yeah, Italy had more hospitals per capita than any other nation in the world.
Exactly.
And they struggled the most with hospitals.
And again, that might be because Italy's population is, in general, a lot older than America's, but still, they do have more hospitals per capita than us, and they were overwhelmed. So
there's a lot of hospitals here that are already being overwhelmed.
Right. Mayor Bottoms of Atlanta said that ICUs are either full or at like 90% capacity right now. ICUs, sorry.
Yeah.
And she made it clear, like at Grady, people are still getting heart attacks. People are still getting in car crashes. Car crashes are actually going down, which is a good thing because people aren't driving and going places. But
people is very, very vague, general. Have you guys seen the pictures of Panama City Beach?
No.
Yeah.
Dude, there's like thousands of people shoulder to shoulder on Panama City Beach right now because they're out of college. They're out of school. Why wouldn't they be?
Governor of Florida got a lot of heat for not closing down Florida beaches weeks ago. Like the Miami Herald basically told Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, what is wrong with you? These beaches should have been closed because guess what? Now Florida has around the same number of cases as Georgia does. And you know that all the people that go to Florida don't live in Florida. Yeah. Obviously. So
they're going to go back home.
Exactly.
And it's just going to spread.
It's gonna
like all the memes you see about how people with coronavirus jump on planes first thing.
exactly.
Yeah, that brings up another point. The whole this is kind of how this whole thing started. Was Dustin, Austin, and I getting into a debate about. It was a bunch of people, but we got into a debate about how much the government hides from the public, and how much that is for the advantage of society versus not. It kind of gets into the same thing. Like, there's a lot of American hospitals that are overcrowded and way overwhelmed, but you don't hear much about it. People aren't
Right.
talking about that. They're talking about how much the curve is flattening, or the media and the government. They're saying we're getting better, we're getting better, we're getting better, but everything else points to we're getting worse, we're getting worse, getting worse. So I guess the question is, like, to what extent is that okay? Is that okay? You know, because we have the power in a certain sense to kind of change that in our country, but do we want to? Like, is there good reason for the government to hide certain things from the public? My personal opinion, like I said yesterday, is that people are stupid, and scared people are much more stupid than knowledgeable, than I guess hopeful people. But to the same extent, if you're aware of the dangers, you're more likely to take the proper precautions to take care of it. So it's a toss-up.
So what are you saying in terms of like what the government would not say, or what it would say? Like, what would it hide?
Well,
What do you
like,
think it might be hiding?
okay, let's do a funny example, right? Let's do Area 51 and aliens, right?
All right.
If people right now found out that there was an alien race barreling our way, ready to attack us, what do you think would happen?
Gun sales would increase in the southern states. New York City would be placed on lockdown, and basically what would happen is what's happening right now. I read a story that in Texas, gun sales are going up like it's an election year.
Oh yeah, that's the other funny part. Like, you know that statistic everybody says, it's like 80% of the guns, these are just made up numbers. I don't know if these are the actual numbers, but like 80% of the guns are owned by 1% of the population or something like that. It's going to be a much broader spread.
So here's something I don't get. And no, I don't know if you can explain this to me, but I only have two hands, right?
Yeah.
Assuming that, like, they're not making guns that are like Nerf guns where you can attach multiple barrels to the sides, right?
Yeah.
That means that I'm limited to a maximum of 2 guns per person, right?
Reasonably one, unless they're handheld, and then
Reasonably
there's very small
one if it's a
number of
long
guns.
rifle or if I have handguns too.
Yeah.
So every year in election year, which we're in an election year, and especially now because we have danger unknown, I heard a stat in the paper that gun sales in Texas are going up exponentially. Like, all the stores are closed, but gun stores are still open.
Of
And
course.
they're running out of ammo too.
Oh yeah. Did you see
So
online sales of ammo, like a box of 1,000 rounds, it's typically like 50 cents, 60 cents a round, is $1 a round now. It's like a ridiculous price increase.
In ammo, I get.
Just because they can take advantage of it.
But you can't physically use more than 2 guns at a time.
So I can answer that question.
All right.
The reason you buy more than 2 guns is because there's different guns for different scenarios.
All right.
So you have your long-range weapon for fending yourself off at a distance, which won't ever be necessary for self-defense unless stuff really goes crazy.
Unless, stuff gets bad.
You have to know that he's an attacker from like a mile away to shoot him a mile away. But it's really good for hunting, right? So those are your standard, like, bolt-action rifles, things like that. Then you have your assault rifles, ARs, AKs, stuff like that. Those are probably by far the best self-defense weapons that you could possibly buy.
Legally self-defense weapons that you could buy, because you have to think that U.S. regulations per hit prohibit automatic weapons. So,
well, automatic weapons still are not necessarily the greatest self-defense weapons, because automatic weapon is very hard to control. So
Right.
odds are pretty good you're going to dance all around your target and not hit them at all.
Right.
Which it depends on your training, whatever you've done, whatever. And then you have shotguns, which are good for just about everything except for long range. They can shoot a kind of a little bit on the longer end is probably close to 100 yards.
well, they shoot shot.
Shotgun.
That's the
Well, for a slug.
point.
Yeah. But shotguns are stereotypically what's assumed as being the best self-defense weapon, but it really doesn't even compare to an assault rifle like an AR or an AK. So it's really just different scenario-specific weapons. Also, it's like a video game, or like a video game was a bad analogy. I don't know. It's like anything that you buy once and you're like, that was a lot of fun, I want another one. And they're all slightly different. So you want to experience shooting different kinds of guns. So regardless of like the practicality of having that many guns, you just want that many guns.
They're toys.
No, yes and no.
Yeah, well,
Yes and no.
Also, you can arm a militia if you feel like it. But
That's the other thing. Some people genuinely think that they need to buy hundreds of guns, or even just 5 or 10 guns, so that they can arm their neighbors and family and friends. At my house, we have 3 bolt-action rifles that we use for hunting. Me, my dad, my little brother. We have the AK, but we only have the AK because we used to use it for hunting before we had our other bolt-action rifles. And we have 2 shotguns that we use for hunting. Both of them are for turkey hunting, but they're both 12 gauge. And then we have a 22 long rifle, lever action cowboy gun that's kind of just for range shooting. And we have 1 pistol that's my dad's that he carries. So it's really, we try not to, as fun as it would be to own 500 guns and go shoot them, whatever, ammo's expensive. The guns are expensive. And so it's not really reasonable to have that many guns. But when you look at a family, 10, 12 guns is really not a ton, because you need specific guns for specific scenarios, like different kinds of hunting.
So, my family, my uncle is really into hunting just about anything. Like, turkey season started 24th.
Mm-hmm.
He was out there turkey hunting.
Yeah.
On 24th. Once duck season starts, do you guys know that the Dixie Fowl Company brand of like hats and shirts and whatnot? You've probably seen it around school. That's his company.
Oh, okay.
So, like, yeah, we have all kinds of Dixie Fowl stuff just because that's how that math works.
Mm-hmm.
But, if you wanted like a good old Southern boy, that would totally be him. But we have or my dad has rather, a semi-auto 22.
Yep.
And then we have a pistol. That's it. And we don't really use them ever because we don't have a need to. So, like, my dad doesn't even have a hunting license. So
I enjoy it. I enjoy hunting. I really do. It's fun, and it's kind of necessary. Right now with white-tailed deer population, especially, they kind of tend to overpopulate pretty quickly if they're not hunted.
right.
That's how the DNR restricts the amount of wildlife. That's how they control it.
That's how they do it.
They lengthen or shorten the hunting season based on the amount of that animal that's populated over the past year. There's pros and cons. I mean, it's a lot of fun. It really is fun to just get out in the woods and go hunting.
What do each of you view the reason for the legality of owning weapons, like guns and whatnot, in the United States?
No,
So,
I'll let you answer this one first.
I think that originally, it was to ensure that the government couldn't become too tyrannical. I mean, that's inarguable, right? In the Constitution, it was put there so that there wasn't a government that could completely control its people with no checks and balances. The only issue is that now the government has so many more powerful weapons than the people can own that if there was such a time where the people decided to try to fight back against the government, it, I mean, it wouldn't go very well. And it would take a lot for that many people to move against the government to be effective. That being said, I do think that there's no better defense for America than having an armed civilian population. Nobody's going to attack. Not with a land invasion, because they know that the civilians are going to fight back, as well as the army. Troop multiplication.
Noah, there's some that you said I'd like to expand on. It's also in the Constitution that the U.S. can't have a permanent army unless Congress authorizes it. A standing army is the language.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that the U.S. has had a standing army since, forever, because woohoo, we're freaking America.
Well, we've also kind of been in wars for forever. Technically,
Yeah, I think that the stat was that we've only truly been at peace for like 4 years of our existence.
Yeah. Well, and technically, it's my understanding, and I may be wrong here, like if you look at the Civil War, there's a number of armies. There's Lincoln's armies, Army of the Potomac Army, like they were commanded by different generals, and so they were separated as different armies. So while we have had a standing army, it's technically been a series of different armies. So they kind of circumvent that.
And okay, yes. So the way it used to be, the Department of War had different armies. Yes, because that's how we arranged things. It was Third Army, Fourth Army, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then we only really use that type of organization when we're actually at war now. Like the last time we had Fourth Army was during World War II.
Yeah.
That was Pershing's army. But yeah, like now we do have a permanent standing army and Navy and Air Force and Marine Corps and Coast Guard and Space Force. And not to forget, I will never forget the NOAA Corps and the Commission Corps of the Public Health Service. So
yeah,
you especially can't forget the Public Health Service right now, because those guys.
Well, and like all across the nation, military training centers for Army, Navy, Marines, they're sending everybody they can to go help out wherever they can.
The Army Corps of Engineers, which I have the pleasure of being their neighbor, and by pleasure I mean they're the most
utter disdain.
They're the most incompetent people alive. But the Army Corps of Engineers, the military side, is what's building all of the field hospitals in New York City right now.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's their job. The Army Corps of Engineers is like the government's contractor to go build crap.
Pretty much. Build crap quickly.
Build crap quickly, yes.
This is a complete sidebar, but you talking about the Army Corps of Engineers reminded me. So you guys know Josh Gates? He's got a bunch of TV shows, Expedition Unknown, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
He just did a TV special in Forsyth County on Lake Lanier.
Yep, I heard about that.
And it was all about how haunted Lake Lanier is, because the Army Corps of Engineers, when they made Lake Lanier, said they moved all of the buried people under Lake Lanier, but didn't. And so there's 20 cemeteries still buried under Lake Lanier.
Sounds about right.
It was a very entertaining episode, because they were like out in the middle of the woods, and there were wind chimes up on a tree, and they were like, "Why are there wind chimes on a tree?" I was like, "Well, I mean, I've seen weirder things in the woods in Georgia." And then they heard, I don't know, I don't even know what it was. It sounded. They played music over it, so you couldn't really hear it in the audience, but it sounded like a scream. My guess is it was a coyote or something.
Yeah.
But it was kind of funny to see these two people who've never been here coming here and exploring Lake Lanier because of how haunted it is.
Oh yeah, Lake Lanier's got all sorts of weird stuff in it. Like, I know personally we have a windsock, like something like that, like a little thing that just dances in the wind. We have an anchor, We have a pair of sunglasses. We have some anchor line. We lost some line
Have
with
you
that anchor.
seen, or can you see the church steeple when the lake is low from your house?
No.
Okay. I've always wanted to go see that. Go, like, check it out. I know Lake Lanier's too murky to see anything underwater, but it sounds pretty cool. That's the other
I
thing.
mean-
You can do scuba diving lessons on Lake Lanier.
It's a terrible idea. You can't see anything.
It's awful.
I've dove to the bottom of just our little part. It was only 12 feet. You can't see anything until you get to the bottom. And the bottom is just weeds. Weeds and sand.
Yeah.
Actually, during the last
And
storm,
mud.
we had a no-wake buoy float up into our backyard. Just kind of floating around. It's in our backyard right now. Still
Oh,
hanging
that's
out.
great. Yeah, because that's not important at all.
Nope.
Start train of conversation by
Yeah,
going.
we started going from coronavirus to guns to the Army Corps of Engineers.
That's exactly the point. Ooh, I like this next question. To what extent should China be held accountable for the outbreak, and is Trump's Chinese virus reasonable? My big question is, have they ever actually really figured out who patient zero is?
They've thought they got him, but it's still unconfirmed. It's China, man. We do.
Well, like, do we know for certain that patient zero came from China? Is it possible that it was someone else visiting China?
Possible,
I mean,
but
think of the number
unlikely.
of people who show no symptoms for the entire course of the virus.
So what we do think we know is that there was one meat market
Yes,
in Wuhan
which makes
that
sense.
was the theory that I've heard is that bat carcasses
Yeah,
were
well, because
next
that's
to
also
other meats that people bought, and they bought the meat and got the virus, and then the rest is history. But that's, I mean, we have no way of verifying what China's saying. Remember, the original state propaganda for China was that it was the U.S. Army that bioengineered it and then dropped it in China. So, like,
yeah. How much can we really trust anything that they're saying? It's like
we can't. That's
right now, officially, the U.S. has more cases than China has had.
Which I totally
But
that-
Yeah.
I'm actually torn on that. It might actually be true because you have to think with the amount of action that the Chinese government took. First of all, it was terrible.
yeah,
Like they did nothing. They denied its existence, and then soon after, you're like, ah, crap, this is
this is a big deal.
this is bad news.
Yeah,
So they basically shut down Wuhan entirely, which,
yeah.
guess what? They're China. They can do that. If you try to do that in America, there would be riots and
People freaking out.
people freaking out like, holy crap, my city just got shut down. What am I going to do?
Yeah,
And then, it's inevitable with the amount of global commerce and trade that China has. It was bound to spread to other places.
yeah.
So
more on that meat market. Have you guys seen that Joe Rogan episode about the coronavirus?
I watched most of it.
Okay, so that expert guy was talking about those meat markets, and I never realized like what those are until that episode of Joe Rogan, right? So I was sitting there watching it, and they pulled up pictures. They literally have live animals in cages, and they butcher them in front of you for you, right?
Yeah, that's how they do it.
And the disease expert that was on the Joe Rogan podcast was like, yeah, and if I wanted to create a deadly super virus that would kill thousands, millions of people, I would put a live ferret over a live chicken, which is what he saw there, was a cage full of live ferrets over a cage full of live chickens. Because chickens have more diseases than anything else, or birds especially. And ferrets are similar enough to humans that the disease can make the jump from a ferret to a person. So that's kind of what he thought happened, was that it was some kind of avian disease initially, and it transferred to a mammalian species like a ferret, and then it mutated and transferred to people. The bat idea has a lot of validity too, though, because that's what Ebola was. It was people in Africa who ate a
Well,
bat.
I think that the thinking on that was that in a bat there are lots of other viruses in the coronavirus family. I know that's not, if someone in biotech were watching right now, they'd slap me in the face for saying the coronavirus family,
Oh, we should try and get someone from biotech on here.
because that's not taxonomically correct at all.
No.
But
A
they're.
bunch of engineers talking about the supervirus.
I know, right? That's exactly what it is. Like, what do we know about this? All we know is physics. Asterisk,
Yeah.
maybe. So I think that's what the thinking on that was, is that there's lots of other coronaviruses and disease in bats, that this one just so happened to make the jump, and now we're all screwed.
Well, that's the thing, is that, like, I've heard that there are currently 5 strains of coronavirus that they're dealing with, which is insane. Because if coronavirus just made the jump from an animal to a person recently, right? Like, even if you eat an animal with coronavirus, it still has to mutate to infect a human body.
Right.
So if it just mutated within the past 6 months to infect a human body and has already then mutated 4 more times to create 5 strains, this is going to be really hard to fight. Like, that's the issue with the flu vaccine every year, is that the flu mutates every year, and they can't always predict that mutation correctly.
It's just a different strain of the influenza virus.
Yeah. But it's really hard to target one strain when there's so many strains going around.
And then coronaviruses have been around since a long, long time. Like, if you go look at a container of Lysol wipes, that's one of the things that's listed on there. This kills coronaviruses. Well,
although I did hear once, this is probably bull, but I read this online one time, that the 0.1% of germs that hand sanitizers doesn't kill includes coronavirus.
That wouldn't surprise me. Purell actually got in trouble for manufacturing hand sanitizer bottles that said kills coronaviruses, because Lysol wipes and hand sanitizers are regulated by 2 different government agencies.
Of course.
That makes a lot of sense.
Efficiency doesn't exist.
Right. So hand sanitizers are considered a drug, and therefore they're regulated by the FDA. The FDA doesn't allow you to put a claim on a product unless you go through all the laboratory testing and
of course
independent. Basically, you can't just put crap on a bottle and say this works.
Well, yeah, that makes sense.
This is an antiseptic product. You can't say it kills this specific coronavirus, because guess what? You didn't do any testing to show that it kills this coronavirus.
It makes sense. You can't just assume that.
Lysol wipes are regulated by the EPA, because technically they're a pesticide, and pesticides are regulated by the EPA.
Wait, Lysol wipes are considered a pesticide.
Think about it.
Still doesn't make sense.
The definition of pesticide in the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act includes bacteria and viruses.
Okay.
So legally,
that's good to know.
Lysol wipes are a pesticide, and the EPA, since it's been tested already, Lysol wipes can show kills coronaviruses, salmonella, SARS, et cetera, because they've already done that testing.
Okay.
They can say kills coronaviruses because guess what? They took some other coronaviruses, put them on a surface, took a Lysol wipe, and went, and then said, okay, they're gone.
For some reason, I don't think that's how they did it.
Well, duh. That's the elementary version of it, but yes.
They just put some coronaviruses.
Yeah,
Did
I
that
just took a bottle of coronavirus and went.
bottle of coronavirus. Doesn't a virus need a host cell to survive?
For an extended period of time, yes.
So could you have a bottle of coronavirus? Maybe fill it with dead skin and then put coronavirus in it.
Spit,
No,
like,
because
spit
dead
halfway
skin
to the
cells
bottle and
not
then
only
just
cell.
put coronavirus in
Like
it.
the only
Like a
reason
spray
that
bottle.
soap and other things work to kill coronaviruses is that the cell membrane it's lipids. We learned about that in biology.
Yeah.
And since soap it's both hydrophilic and I forgot the other word. I don't want to say it's lipophilic. There's some other sciencey word for it. So soap bonds to both water molecules and lipids, and it basically rips the cell membrane apart, killing the virus.
Doom style.
And then ethyl alcohol does somewhat the same thing because alcohols are bases; they're just weak bases.
That's why brewing moonshine is legal now, because you're just making hand sanitizer.
Exactly. So they.
Did you see that in New York, before they went on lockdown, they put out a notice and said that they're not arresting people for minor crimes?
Huh?
Well, why would they do that?
Because their jails were too full. And so they said they were no longer going to arrest or charge people for I don't remember the termage. It was like petty crimes or something like that.
I think that would be more in relation so that the police officers don't come in contact with as many people.
That's feasible too.
Like,
but
I mean,
also
getting a parking ticket in New York City. The New York City speed limit is 25 miles an hour.
yeah.
You're never going 25 miles an hour in New York City.
Well, you know who exploded when they heard that was the street racing community.
Yeah.
Because street racing, technically, it falls into that category.
Yep. So, I mean, I would have to agree with New York City Police Department on that because, I thought the number was like 2,000 New York Police Department officers have already been put out of service just because of the virus.
Yeah. Well, and everywhere, everybody's losing their jobs. That's the part of this, like Austin was saying.
Well, they didn't lose their jobs. It was that they got the virus.
But there's also, like Austin was saying the other day, inarguable economic impacts from this virus already, which means much longer this, and I have no idea where we'll be. Question is, what do we do? Like, is it better to elongate it but stay home so less people get sick? Or do we need to be like, well, everybody's got to get infected before this thing can end, so just let it go and try and recover the economy? Or, I mean, is this relief bill going to be helpful to that, do you think?
I mean, they threw a bunch of money at it, so...
Yeah, but that doesn't always work.
It doesn't always work. It almost never works. Like,
I don't think it ever really has.
I
mean, you could argue, I mean, that's kind of what Roosevelt did, but I don't think that's what worked for Roosevelt. I think the war is what worked for Roosevelt.
Yeah, that's
I don't think him throwing money at it did much at all.
To quote Crash Course, temporary jobs lead to temporary income. So I think it was ultimately World War II that got us out of the Depression.
Yeah.
Now, what gets us out of this? Will the relief bill do something? Sure.
Do you think it's possible that this could be worse than the Depression when we get out of it?
I doubt that. The stock market is saying that they're loving it. So
the stock market is loving it?
They're loving the relief bill.
Oh. Okay. I thought you were saying they were loving Corona. I was like, what?
No.
I mean, I know toilet paper stocks have gone up, but can you imagine having
well, actually I say
invested
that
money in like Purell before this?
So 3:30 right now, and the Dow is down 1.67% on the day. So maybe they finally decided they weren't liking it as much.
Well, that's the other thing is like, for that thing we were talking about earlier with like the government giving hope and lying versus telling the truth 100% of the time. Hope brings the stock market up.
Oh, absolutely.
Which
And
it needs to be taken
so
into.
if I may become cynical for a moment,
That's
one
why
of
we're here.
right, one of Trump's main campaign arguments so far has been, look at the stock market, it's the highest it's ever been. You know, looking at the Dow Jones, he's right. 29,000 on the Dow, that's a lot of money. The problem is that this whole Corona thing, it jumped all the way back down to 18,000 something, and now it's only up to 22,000.
So y'all want to get into conspiracy theories?
Why not?
not?
Let's dabble
Okay,
in.
let's do this. I heard a conspiracy theory that this was all a ploy by the Democrats to get Trump to look bad. Because he lost his primary campaign stance, like Dustin was saying, with the economy being great.
You may not like me as a person, but your 401ks made a whole bunch of money.
Exactly. And now the economy's crashing. And so I read somewhere that somebody was like, yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if this was a Democratic ploy to get Donald Trump out of office.
I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and say that I don't think that either political party is that evil.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
Not only
that,
that capable.
While we're talking about Congress, can I bring something else up that I really like?
Yeah.
Before you do, though, I just want to ask, have there been any Democratic U.S. senators or House members that have been affected? Because I know Rand Paul was affected by it. He's Republican.
In the House, there's all kinds of people that are out.
Well, Dustin's looking that up.
Yeah.
I'm just going to go ahead and say that I don't think there's any way this could have been started by a person or a group of people. I don't think people have the capability of doing this, but it is fun to speculate, especially at the expense of large political groups.
Like I know what Speaker Pelosi was trying to do was pass the coronavirus relief bill, which I'd like to talk about some more, through a voice vote.
Okay.
So that you could just say, like, everyone that's there just says aye or nay and get it over with, which they already passed it. So yeah, that's good. But they were speculating that one of the here it is. So 36 lawmakers, I don't know if that's House or 36 members of Congress have announced steps to self-isolate or otherwise isolate themselves. And that's out of the members that we care about. It's 435 in the House and 100 in the Senate. Pretty decent number.
Yeah. Yeah, I am interested. I don't know much about the relief bill, to be perfectly honest. I know it's supposed to just throw money at people.
So it's all I know. I think the number was 880 pages long.
Of course.
Which, it's
a lot of pages to just say I want to throw money at people.
That sounds about right. Here, I'm gonna just put you here for a minute. Stupid webcam. Now, let me look that bill up because the way that Congress does stuff fast, and this is when I think that we need a constitutional amendment or two just to make things not so screwy. You know how a bill becomes a law?
Vaguely.
All right. So the way things are supposed to work is, let's say I've just been elected to the U.S. House. All right. Let's say that.
Okay.
I introduce a bill.
Please not ever say that.
I've passed a bill, or no, I've written up a bill about whatever it might be. And then I say, okay, I give it to the House. The House then it assigns it to a committee on appropriations, committee on transportation and infrastructure, whatever it may be. And they look at it, they make some notes on it, they might change a few things, and then they vote on it. And if they vote favorably, it goes to the full House of Representatives. All right?
Okay.
So in this case, the coronavirus relief bill started out as this is what it was entitled: an act to amend the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 to repeal the excise tax on high-cost employer-sponsored health coverage. So it started off as a bill to repeal a tax on healthcare. All right?
Okay.
So here's where things get interesting. This was introduced in the House, passed the House, passed committee in the House, so it did all the things. Went to the Senate. The Senate then said, well, you know what? We need to pass this coronavirus thing, right? So the words amendment in the nature of a substitute come up, which is legalese for here. If you want to get stuff done anywhere in Congress, you take a bill that already exists, and instead of introducing your own bill that then has to go through committee and be voted on by the full House or the full Senate, you take a bill that's already passed one House of Congress, like this one, and you say, you know what? Select all, delete. Seriously, that's what you do.
So it technically already got through the House, so they don't have to go through the House again.
Well,
but
wait.
It's not the same bill anymore.
They amended it, so it does have to go back to the House.
Oh, okay.
But it doesn't have to go through committee hearings.
Oh.
Right? So this is where, because if you want to get something done quick, you don't want it to get killed in committee.
Yeah.
Because that'll
You don't want
take
it to
forever.
get killed, period.
So what they did on this was they took a bill that already passed the House, the Senate did, and they said, strike everything and put in this coronavirus relief bill. This 808 pages of coronavirus stuff.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't have to go through committee in the Senate, doesn't have to go through committee in the House. The Republican and Democratic chairs of committees and parties can just sit in a room and type it all up. We don't know what they were thinking while they were doing it, because none of it's on the record, of course. Passes the Senate at 12, it was after midnight. Goes to the House, they passed it this morning, super quick.
Mm-hmm.
No committee hearings, no anything. It just happens.
But could you argue that it was better that it was quick?
So there's high degree, sure, you could argue that it's better if it's quick. But at the same time, why can't the committee just make it quick? Like in this case, the committees could have just voted on it and it would have been done.
But it is feasible that the committee had a lot more hoops that they had to jump through, right?
Well,
Because that's bureaucracy.
Okay, so what?
So I'm saying in certain scenarios, is it beneficial to have the faster process even though it cuts a corner?
Well, here's a better example of something that is far less consequential than this coronavirus bill. There was just when we were doing something in seminar, writing a research paper, one of the bills that was important to us was an act to give money to the National Sea Grant College Program. That's what it originally was. Passed the House, passed committee in the House, went to the Senate. Senate, delete all. They get rid of everything about the National Sea Grant College Program. Nothing about it in there. Labeling genetically modified foods.
So, the question is maybe not necessarily, the question is maybe not necessarily whether the shortcut is justified, but whether it's abused and or whether there's a way to make it so that the shortcut isn't necessary.
So the way you make the shortcut not necessary, in Georgia, they got rid of it. The Georgia legislature, it is constitutional law in the state of Georgia that if a bill has a title, an act to do whatever, the bill can only deal with one subject matter.
And that's the title. Yeah,
that's it. That's the title.
But the question is, like, somebody saw a necessity for this capability in government, right? Other than just abuse of power. Like you said, it's much quicker. Is there a way to create a special case scenario where in certain situations you can accelerate the process without having to cut these corners?
So no one says that this bill needed to spend weeks and weeks and weeks in committee hearings. The bill could have just been written, passed committee with one vote, passed the Senate with one vote, and it would have been fine. Instead, what we did was we had a backroom deal with the heads of all the committees and Chuck Schumer, the Democratic leader of the Senate, and Mitch McConnell, the Republican leader of the Senate, got together in a room and just wrote up this whole 800 and something page document that they then cut and pasted into a totally not even relevant bill.
I see what you mean.
So the point is, yes, is it faster? Of course it's faster, because you don't have to deal with other people. The problem is that if I look at this coronavirus relief bill and I ask, how did whatever that get in there? Who knows?
Yeah.
And if it's ever challenged in the Supreme Court, you have to look back at Congress's intent in their journals. Well, there is no journals. Nobody knows the intent of Congress except for the people in that room who wrote this whole thing up.
One of the main problems is that that process can be used to push through like major bipartisan long-term things that normally would never make it through anywhere, but now all of a sudden that it's to help with coronavirus, they can get rammed through bipartisan.
Obamacare was the same way.
Mm-hmm.
The way they passed Obamacare, it was originally I think it was called the Servicemen's Relief Act. It was something dealing with healthcare for veterans.
Mm-hmm.
Select all, delete.
Obamacare
is born.
Yeah. Well, the same thing just happened in Virginia relatively recently, actually. They had a proposed assault weapons ban for assault rifles, and it was steamrolling its way through government. Everybody thought it was going to pass until like the absolute last minute when they tabled it for another year. So it's still not dead, but they just tabled it until after the next election. But it's really interesting that stuff like that can happen. Like there's so many loopholes.
So Obamacare was it was introduced in the House as the Service Members Home Ownership Tax Act of 2009.
Huh.
Nothing to do with Obamacare in Service Members Home Ownership Tax Act.
Yeah.
Passes committee in the House. Passes the House, goes to the Senate. Delete all. Affordable Care Act.
Yeah.
Passes the Senate, goes back to the House. House passes it, obviously. Goes to Obama's desk, he signs it.
Yeah. And that's another thing is like...
And Obamacare is a huge bill, just like this coronavirus relief bill. They're landmark pieces of legislation that we don't know anything about.
My question is, like, how will this coronavirus legislation that's going in place end up affecting the country after coronavirus, you know? Like, because so many times these bills are written in an emergency and then continued to be used outside
Oh,
of that
absolutely.
emergency.
Like,
So
I
it'll
haven't
be
even read
interesting
the
to
whole
see.
coronavirus relief bill yet because it's 800 pages
Well, you
long.
said it's 880 pages, yeah.
It's huge. I have better things to do in my life. Maybe. I'm not real
Really?
sure.
Press X to doubt.
Like, you know, it's a problem when you have section 1101 A2 A double A 217, and that's like an actual thing. Like,
Yeah.
you have Division A, Title 1, Section 11, like the whole. There should be no need for divisions of titles of sections of paragraphs of subsections of subsections of subsections. Like,
it's like spaghetti code. Like old school programming, it was like you would write your code up at the top and then reference this line down here and then come back up to the top and keep referencing random lines line by line. It's the same thing.
like,
It's just a mess.
and then just think of the people that have to codify all this and put it into the U.S. code. Like, thank goodness we actually have a U.S. code, and then most of the bills now and laws now are just editing the code and adding new sections or deleting text or whatever. Because it used to not be like that.
Yeah.
There used to just be a book called the United States Statutes at Large, and that was the law book. Every law passed by Congress in order. And it was terrible because you had a law and the law had been repealed, and then it might have been reenacted and edited and whatever.
Yeah.
So eventually someone said, this is the stupidest thing ever. We need to make a book with all the laws that are actually in effect right now. So they did it once, they did it again, and now it's just this act referencing this code section, delete this paragraph, add in the following.
Yeah. Imagine having to do that by hand, though. Delete this paragraph, add in the following.
Well, so the U.S. code is published in book form, and they still publish the statutes at large.
Yeah.
They have to, legally, because that's the record of the laws passed by Congress. Legally. If it's not in the book, Congress didn't pass it. And that book is huge. I mean, obviously they split it up into volumes, but still pretty freaking huge. Especially if we're passing 800-page long bills.
So on a considerably less serious note, coronavirus was started by aliens. Dustin just collapsed.
I'm gonna go get something to drink because I feel like I'm shouting at my laptop screen right now.
All right.
Hold up for a minute, guys.
Okay.
Or do whatever. I don't care.
Yeah, we'll probably end up talking about dumb stuff while you're gone. Hopefully. Oh, well, this is a very entertaining conversation.
Yep.
But I'm out of questions.
But we still have the alien one.
We have the alien one, but I don't think Dustin's going to entertain that question.
Nope.
I don't think I'm fully willing to entertain that question. Just Google super controversial questions.
All right. What do you guys think of free will? Do we have free will? Does free will exist?
Ooh, that's a good one.
That's what I've been thinking about for the last few months.
That's a really good one. By my definition of free will, yes, because we are capable of making decisions. However, those decisions are constantly affected by everything around you. So, to a certain extent, yes, but not really, because our free will is actually just the will of our influences. Dustin, did you hear the question?
No.
Do we have free will?
No.
How do you define free will, Dustin?
The ability to do what I want when I want to do it.
Well,
Yeah.
you could also argue that not doing something is your free will, right?
Well, actually, that's not true. I do have free will. I just have to deal with the consequences of whatever my free will is.
I think that you do have free will in that you can consciously or subconsciously decide to enact certain things, but that those actions are not entirely based on your conscious decision. There's other factors that are helping to decide that for you.
So do you believe in determinism, where every single neuron in your brain, like you could predict every single neuron in your brain firing at any given moment, to the point where every decision you make is predetermined by physical law?
I don't think that's true.
I think that there's more to I really do think that there's more to people than their brains.
If you can't tell me how magnetism works, except that there's a whole bunch of lines flowing through a circle, then
Well,
sorry.
there you get to the point where, like, throughout history, nobody's really known anything. I mean, like, there's a lot of areas where nobody knows exactly what's into it, but you could just say that that's like a random number generator in a sense. But when you get down to it, like when you flip a coin,
Well, what is random?
You could say one side is going to come up.
That was a Vsauce episode.
Well, yeah, you could also say that. Okay, so there's two theories that I would follow in this situation, right? One of them is I don't know the names of either of them, but they're both legitimate theories. I just don't know the names. One of them essentially says that every time anything happens, and it could have happened a different way, it actually happens both ways and creates an alternate dimension.
Yeah,
right?
It's a parallel universe theory.
Thank you. Yeah, so like if a particle moves one way and it could have moved the other way, it actually moves both ways and two different universes are created, right?
So there's an infinite number of universes.
Yes, and so you do have free will in that you can consciously make a decision to choose which universe you're going into. But technically, you actually like say you had two choices, you actually choose both choices. It's just your conscious self chooses the one that you want to choose in that moment based on your environmental factors in your past. The other theory the other theory that I really like,
that's kind of like the last Wednesday theory. Like, whether was it last Thursday?
What happened last Thursday?
The universe was created last Thursday.
Oh, I don't like that theory. That theory doesn't make sense.
You can't.
No, you can't.
What is that theory?
The universe was created last Thursday.
The theory the universe was created last Thursday.
Last Thursday was yesterday. So the universe was created yesterday. And everything in your mind is an illusion. All of the history that we know, all of it, has only existed since
last Thursday.
And next week it will only have been created last Thursday. And you can't prove
that. See?
What's annoying with that, though, is that Thursday is an abstraction of like time.
Exactly.
So you're saying it's an abstraction of time. Time doesn't
Physics
really
Bible
matter.
No.
It's just a a concept.
So that's the thing, is theoretically time is a thing. Like, it's not just an abstract, because it's the fourth dimension.
Right.
Now, its name being time is completely unrelated, but like you could call it purple. But it's like you have three-dimensional figures, right, where you have the x-axis, the y-axis, and the z-axis, right, kind of like this. And then you have, in fourth-dimensional physics, you have the time axis, which is at a 90-degree angle from all three of those at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So we can't possibly perceive that. Because we're three-dimensional figures trying to perceive a four-dimensional shape. But you can create a three-dimensional representation of a four-dimensional shape, just like you can draw a three-dimensional shape in 2 dimensions. But technically, time is considered that fourth axis. So our linear passage of time is not the only passage of time. Because if you go, you can graph something or draw a figure that rotates around the time axis.
Well,
So
that's
it's stagnant in time as we see it, but it rotates around the time axis, which is really interesting.
How Einstein defined relativity? Was that, all objects have a mass and they bend the field of space-time a little bit.
Yeah.
And that's what causes gravitational field. And as you speed up relative to an inertial frame of reference, time slows down for you.
Yeah, and it was I think there was also a psychological factor of what Einstein was trying to describe that he either realized or didn't. The idea that the perception of time is altered based on your situation. Because one of the primary examples of general relativity that I've seen is like the spaceship example. Have you guys heard that one? Astronaut sitting in a spaceship listening to a countdown. Time travels slower for them than somebody sitting outside of the spaceship listening to the same countdown. That's psychological. Astronauts flying off into space, time traveling slower for them or faster for them than people on the ground, that would be physical. So
which, luckily for us, we have a unit of time that is based off of something physically happening.
Yes.
Like the second is defined as this many vibrations of a cesium atom.
Oh no, you're right. Yeah.
That's a second.
Yeah. Well, and then you get into years, and years are so trippy. Like, have you ever noticed if a leap year's every 4 years, right? Then how could we possibly be? Because when did that start, first of all, right?
So that started with the dawn of the Gregorian calendar, which was something I just found out yesterday, just a tangent off of that. There was actually a movement during all of the other reform movements that we've learned about so far in U.S. history.
Yeah.
To make metric time.
Metric time.
A calendar.
Please tell me Americans wanted it
more than any other country. That has 13 months and that perfectly divides the year up into 30 days per month, or 28 days per month.
Ugh.
And the main objection to it was, who cares about the calendar? We have so many other issues to deal with. And if we delete the 7-day week, that screws up Sunday church services and Sabbaths, and everything gets stupid.
Well, did you know every 1,000 years or every, I don't know, they skip a leap year.
If the year is divisible by 500 or 400.
500 or 400? 400. Like, that really messed with my head to think about. It makes sense because it's all screwy.
So the Gregorian calendar was introduced by Pope Gregory the 13th, who introduced it in October of 1582.
Okay. 1582.
Which, stuff gets screwy because Britain only adopted it.
No, that was all you had to say.
Stuff 1750. So lots of people had 2 different birthdays, depending on which style the calendar was written in.
That's a lot of fun. Yeah, I can't imagine being born on a leap day.
So
Why not?
That just would be weird.
Wait, if you were born on February 29th, when would your birthday be?
Every 4 years. You would age like, I mean, you'd age the same, but like officially your birthday. I think, Dustin, do you know legally how that works?
So
Like, are
I
you
know
not 21 until you're 104?
no, the way they do that is that you have to wait until the day after. So you have to wait until
Okay.
March 1st until you're legally 21.
Okay, that makes sense. That's weird to me. I liked the question though, Austin. I don't know how we got to leap years.
So Britain adopted it, I think the 1752 is what it was.
1752. Great year. I
Yep.
love that year.
The enactment of the British calendar. Well, the act was 1750, but they didn't adopt it until 1752.
Okay.
Wednesday, September 2nd, 1752, was followed by Thursday, September 14th, 1752.
Okay. Oh yeah, they skipped a week once in the calendar before they had that like divisible by 400 rule. They
Yep.
just skipped a full week to catch up. I think it went from the 12th to the 17th or something like that. So not a full week, 5 days.
So the difference between the Gregorian and Julian calendars. There's a whole formula on how to change it. I don't care.
Nobody cares. That's going to be like the whole thing about this podcast is nobody cares. I don't even know that I would sit and listen to this. But I'll put it online and tell people that it's there.
Yeah, ew. Stupid calendar. Gotta get this.
All right. Well, does anybody have any other questions that we
Time
can talk
travel.
about? Time travel? Like, is
Yeah.
it feasible? Is that your question?
That's my question.
Is it possible?
Is time travel possible?
Okay.
No.
I don't think so. I think that if it was, it'd cause too many problems.
It's not
Why?
possible.
Because, first of all, it's not possible. Fourth dimensional physics is very shaky at best. Don't tell a theoretical physicist I said that. But in my opinion, fourth dimensional and multidimensional physics is shaky at best. Very confusing and not understood very well by anybody. Even if it was, it's all theoretical. So the idea of a fourth dimension is not certain. It's just a theory, right? It would kind of make sense in certain situations, but whatever. But if it were possible, we would know, or we wouldn't know, but if it were possible, it would really screw with things. Just like I was saying earlier with the particles moving, causing different dimensions, you could say that just your existence in a timeline outside of your own or in the improper time would move air molecules slightly differently, which could have cascading butterfly effect. So
Should the calendar start on Monday or Sunday?
the calendar?
Yes, like
What?
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Should it be?
Biblically, it ends on a Sunday.
No. In the U.S., it starts on Sunday.
I know, but biblically, right? The week was laid out in the Bible, with the first 7 days of creation, and each day God did something, and on the seventh day He rested. That was the Sabbath day. That's why Sunday.
So then, why is the U.S. stupid then?
I don't know. I don't know why the U.S. decided 7 days or Sunday would be the start. It doesn't make much sense to me.
Do we want to get into religion?
I'm down.
Me.
Before we do, though, I kind of want to tie it back to the corona a little bit. So, if
Okay.
somebody were to go back in time and stop people from eating raw bats in China,
Good luck.
would there be another virus or sort of natural disaster that takes place here?
Well, once again, you're getting into that whole thing I was talking about with the idea of time travel. The question you're asking, whether you realize it or not, is fate predetermined? Right? Because you're asking if no matter what we do, will the same things happen in the future? Because you could also say, like, next year somebody could eat a raw bat, but they won't anymore because China made it illegal to purchase live animals in those meat markets. So had this not happened, it could very well have happened next year or the year after that or the year after that.
Saturday was the
No change would have been made.
so.
Dustin, do you have a question?
Well, no. Originally, Saturday was the last day of the week because it was the Sabbath.
Wait, really?
Yeah, in Judaism, Saturday is the Sabbath.
So God rested on the first day?
No,
I don't get it.
he rested on the seventh day.
He rested on the seventh day. They just said the Sabbath day was Saturday.
Yeah.
So the seventh day was Saturday. Wait, so then why? I thought I always understood that church was on Sundays because it was the Sabbath day.
Yeah, exactly.
So, wait, that doesn't make sense.
The remnant of the Judeo-Christian religious background that the calendar system that was developed over the last 2,000 or so years. Under the Jewish calendar, Saturday was the last day of the week and considered the Sabbath. The Christians started worshiping on the first day of the week, creating the 2-day weekends.
Is that why we have two-day weekends?
Well, really, the weekend that we have like a 5-day work week, that was because of industrialization. And specifically, I think it was George Westinghouse.
Oh, yeah. Westinghouse was awesome.
That's
Best
like,
industrial.
if you just look at a map of when the days of the week start, like the Americas, it starts on Sunday.
Yeah.
Almost all of Europe, it starts on a Monday.
Okay.
The whole thing is screwy.
Yeah. It's kind of hard to perceive something that's as abstract as time, let alone codify it.
Like,
Is it
I
codify
make
or
all my
codify?
calendars start on Monday, just because that way the weekend stays as a block.
Yeah, I like that better.
So, like, if we're going camping over the weekend, I don't have it on two separate lines of a calendar.
Yeah. Okay,
Because
really
that's
important question. Is it codify or codify? Because I've heard
Codify.
both. Is
codify.
it codify? Okay. I've been saying that wrong for a long time.
Don't you also say Chick-fil-A or something?
No, okay. Jake makes fun of me because I say Chick-fil-A and I put the emphasis on the chick, but you're supposed to put the emphasis on the A. So I say Chick-fil-A instead of Chick-fil-A. And so he gets upset about that.
I'm reading Wikipedia on the whole Saturday versus Monday thing, and
you are the only one who's probably read that article in years.
And it gets even screwier. In Roman Catholic liturgy, Sunday begins on Saturday evening. The evening Mass on Saturday is liturgically a full Sunday Mass and fulfills the obligation of Sunday Mass attendance and Vespers. Vespers on Saturday night is liturgically first Vespers of Sunday. What? Hold up.
But does God exist?
I think so.
What does everyone else think? Yes.
Yeah.
If I have
Do we
I do.
defend that? What?
For what?
You go.
What?
Oh, I thought you were saying something.
No.
Okay.
Okay. I do believe. I believe I can fly. Okay. Yeah.
I don't think it makes much sense that he doesn't. You know, I think that that the Bible explains things in a better way than much else that I've seen ever. Scientifically, religious, it doesn't matter. That's just the best, seemingly most realistic explanation I've found.
Yeah, the way I look at it is I'd rather believe in a God and he's not real than not believe in a God and he is real.
Yeah, you
That
have a
makes
lot to
sense.
lose from God existing and you not believing in him. A lot.
Especially now, Jake sometimes thinks that it's the end times with this coronavirus thing. It makes
I've
sense.
heard.
Well,
Yeah.
you think about it, right? You've got the four horsemen that show up, right? You've got war. World War III almost started. You've got pestilence and plague. That's what we're in now. All that's missing is really famine, which we've had forever. And what am I forgetting? Crap. Now I'm gonna have to Google this because it's gonna bother me.
I got you. Wait. Pestilence, war, famine, and death.
And death. Well, yeah.
We got death.
I think death comes from the other three. But they're not in the right order.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm going to stop looking at the
I mean, you
calendar
could-
thing because that seems to all be subjective and
Yeah.
stupid. And
You
meh.
could sit and say any year ever was the end times, but it's pretty interesting to entertain the idea that, like, hey, this kind of all adds up.
Yeah. I mean, in the Bible, it says pretty directly that nobody will ever know when the
Exactly.
end times is until,
Exactly.
like,
But
then
that
see the
honestly
signs.
means that I don't know that it'll ever happen, right? Somebody somewhere in the world will always be thinking, today might be the start of the end times.
Yeah.
Nope, stop false profiting.
Doesn't mean they
Noah.
know it's then, though.
No, but like right now, like you said, if it was happening right now, very few people would recognize that
I
as
think
what's happening.
that the translation isn't that no one can predict when it's happening. It's that if someone says they know it's happening,
They don't.
when it's happening,
Yeah.
it won't.
Yeah.
So if we pay somebody to always say, I know the end times is today, it'll never happen.
The logical
Well,
fallacy there, though, is that you don't know it's going to happen just because
Exactly.
you say you know it's going to
Yeah,
happen.
right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, also, like, biblically, it's a good thing.
Well,
Like,
let's
the end times is not represented
pull
as
out a book here.
intended to be negative.
What's my book say?
I
My
mean,
book says
Okay. It doesn't matter when the end times is. What I'm interested in.
Yeah.
What I'm interested in is what's y'all's argument for God? Like, do you have a strong argument for the existence of God?
I have to think about that one for a couple of seconds.
Are you coming up with an argument on the spot, though?
Yes.
Darn.
Okay.
Are you going to survive college then?
The way I see it, this is gonna get like super like philosophical and kind of out there, all right? But this is my best argument, and it's that we exist. You look at each and every individual one of us, and how extremely different we are, regardless of social differences, right? Like, I could be brought up in the exact same place with the exact same person with the exact same experiences as somebody else, and we're still not the same person. We look different, we act different, we have different personalities, and there's more to that, I think, than just your neurochemical responses. And I think that you can, if you really just look and you start walking around and you look outside or you look at other people just walking down the halls at school and you really start to think about it, you're like, no way is all of this just, oh, it's random. It just happened. It just happened to happen. You can see that there's design. You can walk down the halls at school and see hundreds of people's heads bobbing, walking down the halls side by side. And you can either just be like, oh, it's other people. Or you can be like, there's a reason that each of these people got to this point where I'm sitting here looking at them and thinking, these people might be here for a reason. And everything just adds up when you think about it like that, which is really interesting.
But couldn't you just say that evolution is what designed you? I mean, you can say like everything looks designed, but in a sense, evolution designs
also,
by definition.
You could say that, but what I'm talking about is less of the evolutionary tract and more of the idea that there's more to the human body than the human body.
So, do you think there's a metaphysical force outside of actual physics, outside of actual physics, that causes that, like, your soul doesn't exist in this universe? That's essentially what I'm saying. Or, like, is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that I think that the soul does exist and that it's not comprehended. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, I think there's more to the human body than science will ever be able to account for. And I don't think that you can ever account for people's personality differences or even all of people's actions based on solely their neurochemical and physical responses. I think that just the idea of thinking, like the ability to conceptualize, there's not a single other animal on the planet that is capable of conceptualizing the way that human beings can. It's the reason that we are sitting in houses right now and they aren't, other than pets, which is another abstract conceptualization that we've come up with as an idea for companionship, which is another abstract conceptual. The ideas that we can, the ability that people have to sit and think and see an apple and then classify that as an abstract group of things called apples and recognize, okay, these are all apples, but then recognize the differences between each of those within that abstract conceptualization. It's an incredibly complicated process, and we do it with relatively minimal physical augmentations to assist us. Like, we've got 3 color cones for our vision, right? There's animals that have 15 or 12, mantis shrimp, for example. We're honestly pretty, I would say, with the exception of the opposable thumbs, we're pretty ineffective survivors, if that makes sense. Like, put a human being out in the woods at any point in time, and without our ability to develop tools using opposable thumbs and abstractions, we wouldn't survive. But because we can look at a tree and not see a tree, but see, hey, that's wood that I can build something with. Or because we can look at rocks on the ground and say, hey, I can sharpen that and use that. It puts us a step ahead of everything else. And I think that there's no way that came about through natural evolution.
But
I think it's Go ahead.
Can't you use evolutionary theory to describe that? I mean, because
you could use evolutionary theory to describe that, but there has not been a tendency or a capability to teach any of our closest, by evolutionary theory wise, evolved ancestors to create abstracts like that. Like, you see, think of the ideas of good and evil, right? We have this capability to present certain things as evil and certain things as good. But what gives us that capability and what good and evil are not very clear. But like, you and I could, all 4 of us can sit here and say all day long, oh, that's good, that's evil, that's good, that's evil. Some are gray areas. And
with that, you could, in terms of good and evil, you could say that in an evolutionary setting, good and evil have their own functions as like forming a functional society within human beings.
But
watch yourself there.
Well, no, that's a reasonable claim. Dustin, what do you mean, watch yourself?
I was just gonna say that what might be evolutionary advantageous to humans, i.e., yeah,
yeah, okay.
might not be. Some might classify that as not good at all. Some might
That's what I'm
classify it
saying.
as evil.
That's kind of what I'm saying, is that people, what defines good and evil differs from person to person in a way that is not entirely societal based. Now, yes, you can
Me
have
and
a societal
the
influence,
scouts from Luxembourg had a huge debate over this at the World Jamboree.
well, no, this is like the argument about being a civilian in Nazi Germany, right?
Right.
You knew what was going on. Some of them did, and they didn't do anything about it. Did they not understand it as evil? Did they think it was good? Was that purely societal? Was that some kind of evolutionary difference? The thing that I struggle with the most with evolutionary theory is that I don't see how it's possible to scientifically explain every action and thought of a human being. I think there's way more to it than that. For example, like I said, remember that Socratic seminar when Thatcher was just really screwed with when I said something? I was saying that all of the words that I'm saying are not my words. Somebody else has said them before. Somebody else may have even said them in this order before. But the way that I'm presenting my opinions with those words, my thoughts, my abstractions, those are unique to me. Somebody else may have had those thoughts before, and they may be made up of other people's thoughts, but I have the unique ability to develop my own mental creations in the form of sentences that are unique to my verbiage and my experience. So I have the capability to say sentences that have never been said before, using words that have been used before, and some phrases that have been used before, but in a way that completely shifts people's mindsets or viewpoints on a topic. That's something that I don't think comes from a neurochemical response. I think that there's a part of you that enables you to develop unique and abstract thought completely separate from societal and community that really is what makes humanity unique compared to other organisms.
Okay, well, scientific evidence seems to point the other way. Fairly strongly-ish, as far as I can tell. So in that sense, I find that argument a little bit fickle.
No. What do you mean by scientific evidence? Like with the neurochemical part?
Yeah,
like
you can scan your brain and you can see a physical actual response to certain emotions, to certain things, and you can see certain parts of your brain light up to certain aspects, to certain thoughts, to certain degrees of thoughts.
Yes, but how does that convert into conceptualization? You can see that in a dog. You can see that in a monkey. You can see that in anything. But they aren't able to conceptualize or abstract objects.
Well, if you want me to use evolutionary theory, the development of language created, more or less developed our frontal lobes, and we have the biggest frontal lobes of all other animals.
But there's other animals that can communicate.
Yeah, I'm not saying that no other animal can communicate. I'm just saying language. Like, we have actual words for an abstraction of like an object or movement. Like, that's way above any what an
But on the same
animal
note,
can do.
there's people who, so there's two different methods of thinking, right? You can conceptualize and think in words, and you can conceptualize and think in images. And a lot of people think that's like goes back to the left brain, right brain thing. But a lot of people, when they read a book, they don't like when I read a book, I read the words aloud to myself in my head, right? And then I try to picture the scenario. A lot of people read the words and don't comprehend the words, they comprehend the images.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always wanted to meet someone like that. Like, there's people who think only in images, and there's people who think only in words, and then there's some people that can think in both. And it's really interesting to think about, but that's done without language.
Well, how do you think in words?
What?
How do you think in words?
Like when I think, I don't see an image in my head. I hear in my head my own words.
It's like constantly talking to yourself.
So you're probably one of the people who thinks in images.
Maybe, probably.
Give me one sec. I have a thing. This might be helpful. Hold on.
Okay.
I have a thing.
It's always useful.
Why do all books not have easy to find tables of contents?
Mm-hmm.
Huh. I don't know. This is beyond my depth. I'm way out of my league with this one.
I have some news for you.
News?
Yes.
What's
So,
the news?
The news is that Trump orders a company, I'm going to let you guess the company, to make ventilators under the Defense Production Act. Give me a company. Hint, has nothing to do with healthcare.
Of course not.
Ford.
Playmobil.
Apple.
No,
Google?
General Motors.
General
China.
Motors is correct.
Yes.
General
Wow.
I
Motors.
heard it somewhere in the news at some point.
Actually, no.
General
that does-
Motors can't
that
make a
does
good
make
car,
sense.
but can maybe make good ventilators.
That does make sense to a certain extent. Because think, what does General Motors have to use in their shops all the time?
Based
Paint
off my
shops,
dad's
especially.
truck, it appears they don't use much.
Ventilators.
No, like the machines, not respirators. Respirators are the masks.
Yeah,
Ventilator is the machine that breathes for you.
I thought a ventilator was like the paint mask, the ones that actually
No,
filter the air
No,
as you
that's
breathe.
a respirator.
Okay.
A ventilator is a machine that physically does.
Well,
the
I mean,
breathing
Ford
for you.
made tanks.
It's still like the same basic idea. Put an
Not
engine inside of
really.
an iron thing and make it go forwards. I mean, heck, Ford made tractors for a whole bunch of years. They were basically just Model Ts with Caterpillar tracks.
Yeah, I guess. No, they were not Model Ts with Caterpillar.
No, that's what they were. The Fordson tractor was a Model T with Caterpillar tracks. I'm gonna look that up and show it to you. The Fordson tractor. Let's.
Before we move on too far,
It's the big one.
Yeah.
in terms of like, I was like attacking your
No, you're good.
reason for believing in God a lot,
No,
right?
you're good. No, I enjoy this.
No,
It's
No, but
educated
like,
conversation.
I do believe in God, even though I have pretty good arguments against God. And so like, do you want to hear my argument for the
Yeah,
existence of God? So I have multiple. It's more of a thing of probabilities instead of anything else, really.
Okay, I lied. The engine was a Model T motor. Sorry.
All right, that's fine. So if you have a lot of experiences that seem to suggest the existence of God, then there's likely an existence of God, right?
Yeah.
So the first part is, yeah, I exist. That's the very first probabilistic statement. And when I say I exist, the universe exists, and the universe shouldn't exist because matter exists when it technically shouldn't, according to its own laws, right? So in that statement, that seems to suggest there's a pretty good chance that there's an outside force. it might not be that great of a chance just by that. Then the second is, yeah, I am on Earth. Evolution might explain that, my existence, but that's a fairly small percentage chance increase. But then the big increase for me is Jesus Christ coming down to Earth and the existence of the Bible, really.
Yeah.
Because I mean, there's multiple witnesses in the Bible, and all talking about, I mean, big, like, the kind of stuff, like actual miracle stuff, right? An actual rising from the dead. And it's hard to refute that historical evidence. There's very few things that have ever existed throughout history that have that much evidence backing it up. At the same time, a lot of atheists will argue the Bible's been changed since then. There's also good evidence, though, to suggest that fairy tales have been passed down verbally through many, many generations, thousands of years, with very little verbiage change at all. And the Bible itself is very well protected by many religious communities and copied down very rigorously to be exactly as it should be. So that's not a very good argument against that. Also, the speed at which Christianity spread around the world is also a huge factor. So all those probabilities put together, I mean, that itself is a big one. All those put together equal a very big chance of Jesus existing or God existing.
So to play a little bit of devil's advocate, the biblical claim that a lot of atheists make, I do actually find some validity in that claim, only because the early church, when it was accepted by the Roman Empire, the emperor at the time sat down with a committee of people to write the new Christian Bible. And they decided which books by which, because there's like hundreds of books to the Bible, but we only get some of them, right? He decided which books were going in there and which parts of those books were going in there, and they censored the Bible, portions of the Bible, and that's the Bible we currently have today. So, although it's still the Bible, right? So there, even though there were some alterations to it, it's still the same text. He just cut things out of it. Historically, is what most evidence supports.
It's funny because if we then go to Revelations for a minute, we see there's some language about whoever deletes any text from this is gonna.
Oh yeah. Well, and that's the thing is, that's why Christmas isn't on Jesus's birthday. You guys know that, right? Like you've heard Jesus's actual birthday's it's based around the pagan holiday, in December.
Well, so there's also some thinking that because the way it was is that if you take Jesus' birthday and subtract 9 months, you get December 25th, because the birthday of Jesus was
when he was conceived.
Yes, exactly.
But there's also lots of evidence supporting the idea that during that same portion of time, the Roman emperor decided that it would be easier to convert people to Christianity if the holidays lined up with their already existing pagan holidays. And there is a pagan holiday that takes place around the very same period of time. And so he altered certain aspects of the Bible in order to make conversion easier. But this is all, it is not the most supported historical evidence of all time. Let's put it that way.
The coronavirus relief bill just got signed into law, by the way.
That's great. Hopefully it'll be helpful.
How long are we going right now? This is an hour 49 minutes. Holy crap.
I hope it's still recording. Yeah,
it's still recording.
Oh, that's going to be...
How long are Joe Rogan?
Enter this. I might just straight up post this on YouTube, but it's going to be good. No, but I do agree with you. Like, the speed at which it spread and the situation it spread under. Like, Emperor Nero, during the very start of the Christian church, he blamed everything on the Christians, right? So he was really big into construction, loved to build things. So when he stopped getting permission by the Senate to build things, he burnt down the city of Rome, burnt the entire city down so he could rebuild it. And then he blamed it on the Christians. And so you'd walk down the streets and there would be Christians up on crosses on fire down the sides of the street everywhere. And that was where the Christian church started. If people were that devoted that they were willing to risk their lives like that, risk torture and death, and a very painful death, something had to have happened.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't make sense otherwise.
Yeah. Also, like, I just kind of want to say, the Bible, I interpret the Bible, I don't interpret it as though it's a perfect document handed down from God, as though, like, he's, like, I really don't
same way.
think it's everything.
I think that the biggest issue with the Bible is that it was written by man, and man is inherently imperfect.
Yeah.
But that being said, it is the closest thing to God's word that we have.
Yeah.
So I mean, and if you want to say that the Old Testament was handed down to Moses, there's reason for that. I mean, the Ten Commandments, it's a funny joke. Who broke all the 10 Commandments at once? Moses, because he broke the tablet that they were written on.
Yeah.
But
Noah, have you listened to Jordan Peterson's The Biblical Series?
Not all of it, but a lot of it. I think I'm 3/4 of the way through it. I usually
try to
in the process of listening to it now.
Yeah, I usually try to interpret the Old Testament at least that way.
Yeah.
Because I don't really see
I think there's value in having a multitude of interpretations for the Bible. I think that psychologically, like Jordan Peterson's interpretation is incredibly useful. And I think that his interpretation of all different, like he does that for all hundreds of thousands of different beliefs, and like literally anything he can get his hands on, he can find a way to interpret it psychologically, which is pretty cool. But I think that there could be value to trying to interpret it in a somewhat more literal sense. For lack of a better reason, for lack of a better series of verbiage, lack of a better way of saying it, just so that you can understand that you can believe something that seems unbelievable, if that makes sense. Like, there's a lot of things early in the Bible, the flood, the Genesis story, it just seems completely unbelievable, right? And there's value to being able to sit there and recognize, like, this doesn't make any sense, but I can still believe it, which I think is, it sounds like it's not a good thing, but I think there's a lot of power in that. And that goes back to your free will thing, right? If you didn't have any free will, how could you believe something that you can't believe?
Yeah.
That's really shaky, but whatever.
Yeah.
I think that. Sorry, go ahead, Austin.
I don't know. One way I've heard the universe described by someone smart is like as a painting of God in a sense. So you could say, like, if a painting is set in stone once it's painted, but I don't know.
Well,
you could say that even though if everything's even predetermined, it's like, I don't know.
That's the other thing that's really kind of weird about the Bible, and something that I've really struggled to understand, is that, like, it says that God gave us free will, right? Like, that's kind of the whole basis of the Bible. It's how it starts, literally, is God gave humanity, I mean, pretty much. God gave humanity free will, and that's why we messed up and ate the apple, and everything is crap now, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it also says that God is above time, right? Like, when he sends Jesus, it says in the Bible, I can't remember the verse for the life of me, but it talks about how Jesus' sacrifice saved all people, present, future, and past. So he retroactively saved people. So does that mean they were saved when they died? And if they were saved when they died, does that mean that their fate was predetermined? Which then does that mean that they don't have free will?
So you get even weirder in that when you think that in Judaism, the concept of heaven doesn't exist.
Yeah.
It's just, once you're done, to quote the system or the Simpsons, you're done. Kaput. It's the end. Or actually, not the Simpsons. It was Family Guy. Sorry.
Yeah.
Even though I believe in God,
really
I don't interpret the Bible literally at all, really.
As you can see, I get all of my liturgical information from Family Guy.
It is pretty interesting to sit and think about the psychological implications of the story of Jesus' sacrifice, right? I mean, it's like Jordan Peterson says all the time, like, the Bible is showing you meaning, right? It's showing you essentially how to live a meaningful life. And it talks about the golden rule, love your neighbor as thyself, but I think it's more than that. And Peterson kind of hints on this a lot too. The idea that the single most important event in Christianity in general is the sacrifice of Jesus Christ, right? Then shouldn't sacrifice be an integral part of everybody's life?
Hold up.
Yeah.
And so on that same note,
I would argue that the biggest part isn't that, but it's what happened 3 days later.
Oh, his resurrection. Well, that's okay. So there are some circles in Christianity that like to think that everything that happens in the Bible happened so that Jesus could die on the cross and be resurrected, right?
Right.
So God gave Adam and Eve free will, knowing that they would eat the apple, knowing that sin would be brought into the world so that he could sacrifice Jesus. Which kind of, I don't know, it's kind of an interesting stance to take. I personally don't really agree with it. I haven't read the Bible enough to know whether there's any statements in the Bible that agree or disagree with that, but I think that that's the biggest issue with the Bible and Christianity is that, well, maybe it is God's word and it's handed down from generations, but it is exactly God's word and it is a representation of exactly what God wants for us. We interpret that, and we interpret that through the lens of a bias.
And then, you say that, Noah, but we have to remember that in the early Christian church, the Bible was only written in Latin.
Yeah.
The only person that could ever read as John Green would say, the one person that you would know that could read the Bible was your parish priest.
Yeah.
And, that only came along with Martin Luther and publishing the Bible in German.
But then even earlier, Christian church, there was no Bible. There was no church. There was no priest. It was just a group of people who got together and worshiped the king who came and was saved.
Well, that's because at that point it wasn't even a new religion yet. It was
But it's still
Judaism.
Called church.
It was Judaism thinking that the Messiah described in the Old Testament,
which is Christianity.
It's actually just Judaism. At that point, it's still just Judaism plus a Messiah.
But technically, that's what Christianity is intended to be. It's just Judaism with the understanding that the Messiah.
And the way that gets screwy is that, we when I say we, I mean Christianity. We don't follow a whole lot of the Jewish laws that are in the Old Testament.
Because when the Messiah came, he said that we don't have to.
Exactly.
But he did say so. To put it in,
so that's what made
general interpretation that I can muster. The way I see the Bible is, it's a code book. It tells you the history, and it tells you, it gives you the laws that you should follow in order to be a perfect person. And then it tells you you're not going to be a perfect person. You're not going to be able to follow all those laws, and that's okay. And it's like reading from start to finish the Bible. You read the Old Testament. The moment you hit the New Testament, it's it's a completely different world. Because the Old Testament is all do this, do this, do this, or you die, eternal damnation, you go to hell, you're screwed, God's awful wrath comes upon you, stuff like that. And then the New
God
Testament
saying,
comes,
I'm a jealous God.
Yeah, the New Testament comes and Jesus says essentially, like, look, yeah, you're going to screw up these laws. That's just original sin happened, so you're going to screw this up. But that's okay. You can deal with that. And then it goes on to say, like, the purpose for following those laws is not so you can be a perfect person anymore. You can't. Stop trying. The purpose of those laws is so that you can build a relationship with God and Jesus. And that's what God has wanted this entire time, is to have a relationship with every person on the planet. And that idea is really incredible, right? Because you have this omniscient, all-powerful God that's above time, above everything. And he wants an individual relationship with every person on the planet. Which is really an interesting way to see it.
I also kind of like Nietzsche. Nietzsche's this book Zarathustra. I like his interpretation of of like purpose and existence. More of like, instead of considering, like, he obviously hated like he hated he hated Christianity pretty much.
Yeah, definitely not a Christian.
Definitely hated Christianity.
Definitely that.
But he definitely realized the importance of religion and the importance of the ideology of Christianity. And he made a psychological interpretation of pretty much everything, really. I mean, if you've read his book, this book Zarathustra, I mean, that thing is sick. Yeah. So like, instead of considering heaven to be like an actual metaphysical heaven where you go to, it can be a mixture of your ideologies extending across time, or your actual genetic makeup extending beyond time, and it's more of like an actual evolutionary ideology in a sense. Oh, atheist. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that's, I think, the most interesting part, is that regardless of the believed or the validity of the Bible and Christianity, it in and of itself teaches something that is not intended to cause any harm. It has caused harm, but it's not intended to. And it talks, the entire Bible, the reason I think that there's so many issues with people thinking about how much harm Christianity has caused and how the reasons why it's caused that much harm is because the entire Bible talks about all the things that you can do that are bad, right? And Old Testament, New Testament, it talks about the things that you can do that are wrong. And then in the New Testament, it talks about how one of the things that you can do wrong, that's one of the most wrong, is to judge others for doing those things that are wrong, right? And that's one of the things that goes through the entire New Testament, is this idea that you don't have the power to judge others whether they're right or wrong. I feel like too many people skip over that part, and they read all the this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, and then they think, okay, I know everything that's wrong now. I can go after the people who are wrong. And people look for an excuse to abuse power like that all the time. And so when it seems like this religious text is validating that excuse, it causes a lot of pain. But people misunderstand that that's never been the intention.
Yeah, this is something that kind of annoys me with mainstream atheists, is their lack of understanding that the Bible isn't necessarily like, they just take it in a sense where they think everything in it is terrible and awful or stuff like that, and they blame everything on it. And they think it's bad for society. But
I think that's the issue with every debate that we've had in the past 10, 15 years. People get so ingrained in their side of the argument that they don't even hear what the other person has to say. Or they do hear it and they immediately negate it. They don't care that there may be some validity to some portion of it. They just want to be right and want the other person to be wrong. And that's why we struggle to have educational discourse. And when we have educational discourse, like Jordan Peterson's podcast or Joe Rogan's podcast or things like that, that's why those get such a massive following, is because people are starved of that. People are really looking for that.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
I can agree with that.
Well,
so now that we've
officially
covered like everything under the sun,
we've officially passed 2 hours. That's pretty good.
Wow.
Wow.
Good
Joe Rogan
Lord.
experience. Wets. I don't know.
WetzCast.
The WetzCast.
That
Yes.
y'all got to help me come up with a better title.
Hey, come on, I like this one.
We should let it be christened by the coronavirus chem support group. What should we call this beast that we have created?
I'm gonna post it on YouTube and send a link and be like, y'all, good luck.
Yeah.
And I'm probably not really gonna edit it. I'm gonna cut the first like 10 minutes where we sat there and didn't do anything, and then I'll get Sean to make us intro music.
All right. Well, good talking.
I'm out of words.
talk, guys.
So I'm
This was
stopping.
great, guys.
Yep.
This was awesome.
Why is it not stopping? Stop recording.
Uh-oh.